Good afternoon and welcome to our town hall, Leveraging Game-Based Learning to Increase STEM Engagement. My name is Tim Edwards. I'm the Chief Program Officer here at STEM Connector in Washington, D.C. Today we have an expert who's authored a book on game-based learning, an educational game developer, as well as students and parents who are using games to learn outside of the classroom. And we also have a big supporter of STEM and math and game-based learning in PwC, who you'll hear from later. First, before I get started and before we move into the town hall, I'm going to invite my boss, the Chief Executive Officer of STEM Connector, Edie Fraser, just to say a couple words. So here's Edie.
Thank you, Tim, and to each of you, to Tim Edwards, a particular salute, but to Mind Research Institute in particular, and the fact you're reaching about 1 million kids now, to the teachers, to the students. It is so exciting to see the corporations want to hear from the students, from the teachers, and Greg Tapo also from USA Today. So quickly, we know that game-based learning is revolutionizing learning in school and out of school, and clearly taking over some of the means of keeping kids engaged. So it is exciting. So we know it allows kids to stay engaged, and clearly, but just what does it all mean for the future? Because today, 155 million Americans regularly play games and video games. And if we can get it to be really constructive to learning, like the kids and teachers, 42% of Americans play 3 hours a week. And 4 out of every 5 American households contain a device to work with their kids and others to increase learning. And U.S. consumers spent $22.41 billion just on the equipment. So out of the 700 million over across the world that are playing games and playing games with their kids, with their teachers, what we want to say is that we salute each of you and realize, like Mind Research does, that working together with kids and students all the way up the system will change our way of engaging to full, exciting careers. Thank you, Tim.
Sure. Thank you, Edie, very much. Appreciate that. Great factoids and data to set up the town hall today, so that's wonderful. Yeah, I think we all know math is a foundational skill for all levels of learning, and very important as a foundational skill set for STEM and for STEM careers. So in order for students to be successful and to get into STEM careers, they need a very strong math background. And one of those ways students can obtain that is through programs like Mind Research and ST Math. So just a couple other things. STEM Connector's partner, Mind Research Institute, is a leader in game-based learning through their program, ST Math, which reaches 1 million students in over 40 states with some pretty remarkable results. The ST Math program typically sees double to triple the amount of growth in math proficiency, which is pretty unusual in education. So, like Edie said, we've been a long supporter and believer in Mind Research Institute, and love to hear more about them today. Recently, Mind Research Institute has also taken a step outside the classroom and into the informal environment, using the hashtag MathMinds. So please follow that. And also, we're going to have a question and answer period towards the end of the session. So if you have questions for any of the speakers today, please submit them through hashtag MathMinds on Twitter or Google+. Through MathMinds, Mind Research Institute is working with teachers and students to look beyond the achievement gap and into the experience gap, which refers to the many students, often from underserved backgrounds, who lack the rich mathematical experiences that lead to deeper mathematical understanding and greater joy in the learning process. So our first speaker is Greg Tapo, who is USA Today's national K-12 education reporter. Earlier this year, Greg published the book on game-based learning called The Game Believes in You: How Digital Play Can Make Our Kids Smarter, which has received glowing glowing reviews from the New York Times, Washington Post, and NPR. Greg has also taught in both public and private schools for 8 years before moving into journalism. So Greg, I have a few questions today about your book and what your thoughts are on game-based learning. So for those in the audience who haven't read the book, tell us a little bit about the premise of The Game Believes in You.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Tim. I guess the first thing people should know about the book is that one of the things that I wanted to do with it is to provide people with a kind of an on-the-ground look at what was happening in schools. There's been a lot of theoretical writing about games and learning. There's been a lot of scholarship about it. And what I wasn't seeing was kind of a good look at how it's playing out. This field, for lack of a sort of a solid date, is about 15 years old. And I wanted to see, in 15 years, sort of how far it had come. I mean, some people would actually date it back maybe even closer to 40 years if you take things like the Oregon Trail into account. But I just wanted to see sort of what was happening in schools, how teachers were using games, how kids were benefiting from games, and essentially, what the landscape looked like. It's actually started from a conversation I had a couple of years ago with one of my daughters about her relationship to books. And what I found was that she really didn't have a relationship to books. And unlike, when I was growing up, books were a very big deal for me. So I kind of went down this path of thinking about this generation of kids and their media environment, what their relationship was, excuse me, to the media in their lives. And what I found very quickly, no surprise to anybody, I think, was that video games were a really important thing in their lives and were a really big sort of growing force. I didn't even really know why or how. I just knew that they were important. And once I started looking at the games and learning piece of this, I started meeting teachers, I started meeting researchers, started meeting game designers who were doing some really fascinating things. And I sort of just took a deep dive from there.
Thanks, and it's really good to hear about the personal connection you made and how you came. Yes, and how you made that connection. Greg, how is the experience different when kids learn through games as opposed to other traditional learning methods?
Yeah, I guess, I don't want to make too much of a difference between games versus traditional learning because obviously, we've been learning traditionally for thousands and thousands of years. What I do want to say is that when kids are learning through games, I think it can often look a little different. I guess the one word I would use would be focus. Games have the potential to really focus what's happening in a lesson and really give kids the chance to dig deep into material that they might not have gotten otherwise. There's a term, and it's actually a game design term that folks use in this field, and it's called hard fun. And if you're a game designer, this is sort of a term you've been hearing for years and years. And essentially, what it means is that you're creating an experience for someone that is both enjoyable and difficult at the same time. And that's really why we play games in general, whether it's a video game or basketball or chess. We're both having fun and doing something that's really challenging. And that's actually, if there's any sort of theme to the book, it's that games have the potential to make school both enjoyable and also really challenging for this generation and obviously for the generations to come. One of the things that I really got excited about doing research for the book was thinking about the fact that our kids, they want a challenge. They're bored in school, ironically, but they want a bigger challenge than they're getting most of the time. So if we want our kids to compete, with China and South Korea and Finland and all these other places, we need to figure out a way to both engage them on the one hand and make what they're doing more challenging. And I've been covering education for more than a decade, and what I found was that this was the first time that these sort of two sides of the education conversation were talking to one another. We talk a lot about how we want our kids to compete, but we don't. The folks who want our kids to compete don't often talk to the people who want our kids to enjoy school. And in a sense, the games and learning field, these are the same people.
Great, yeah, I love hearing about the hard fun and the experiential part of this and making it. I think definitely, you know, when we're trying to get kids excited about STEM and we're trying to get them, you know, to think about careers after school, and really trying to fill that workforce of the future, it's definitely, you know, making a connection for them and making something fun. It's something that I really think is important and something that I think we all think is important in this community.
Yeah.
The next question, Stanford professor and NPR math guy Kevin Devlin said you are one of the few people who can truly understand the potential of game-based learning and can distinguish from the few good learning games currently available from the ocean of crap. Any tips for the rest of us on how you can make that distinction?
Well, Keith is smart enough to produce one of the few games that wasn't crap. And that was very kind of him to say that. I mean, I guess basically the way I found differentiation happening was that I just played a lot of very, very bad games, and when I found the good ones, I really it was kind of like a breath of fresh air. I mean, it's hard because if you go to something like the Apple's the App Store and just type in something like education or even math or fractions or what have you, you're going to get hundreds, maybe even thousands of hits, and it's hard to tell sort of what's good from what's bad. I mean, I would say a couple of things. Number one, I think you just have to try a few, see what comes recommended, most recommended. What I would suggest, if you're really serious, I mean, if you're a parent or you're a teacher or someone who's sort of, if you will, a gatekeeper to a kid's experience, is to look at some of the work that's been done by folks like Common Sense Media. They've done a lot of work through vetting things with their graphite tool. It's called Graphite. If you look at something like the Games Design Studio in Los Angeles, Game Desk, they have something called Educade, C-A-D-E, where they've kind of curated some of these materials. And then, I recommend to everybody to read something like the Mindshift Guide to Games and Learning, which really helps, I think really helps folks think in a sort of not only clearer way about some of these issues, but at a sort of at a higher level, really think about what are the things we're trying to do when we're bringing games, let's say, into a classroom or to a kid's life. Those are some really worthwhile resources.
Great, thank you. I'm sure the audience really appreciates those pointers, and I'm sure most of them, or at least some of them, have picked up your book before.
I hope so.
But in the big picture of things, what does the future look like for game-based learning in the U.S. and maybe even beyond that to the global?
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, I think it's a really exciting time. One of the things that was a real surprise to me, I've worked on this book for about 4 years, and the field is very different now than it was when I started reporting on this book. I mean, as I say in the beginning of the book, as I was getting to the end of the reporting, I would meet people pretty much every day who were doing amazing work, but I just couldn't sort of cram them into the book just because it was too late. There's some really exciting stuff going on, both in the research field and in the game design field. I think there's a way in which, on the one hand, sort of adults get it the way they didn't before, just a couple of years ago. And I attribute a lot of this to the fact that they're gamers now, right? They have things like smartphones and iPads. They're playing games at a level that they never did. So they get the idea of hard fun. They get the idea of intrinsic motivation. But there's also kind of a critical mass of people designing really interesting stuff, not just for the classroom, but also just for play in general. And I think is seeping into the water, if you will. People are playing at a higher level than they were before. People are spending, I mean, this is a really interesting little tidbit. People of all ages are spending less time watching TV. They're spending a lot more of their sort of discretionary time playing games. That has an effect. People understand this world, I think, at a deeper level than they did just a couple of years ago. So I think it's really going to be promising because I think we're going to get more cool stuff, more teachers, more parents understanding this at an intuitive level. And I think those two things are going to come together to really, hopefully, produce some great results. We'll see. I'm crossing my fingers. I mean, I hope it doesn't become just a fad. I don't think it will. But I do hope that people will see games as a tool and not as sort of a miracle worker, not as something that's going to fix everything. I think that's, if anything, that's the biggest risk that we run, that people are going to say, you know, in 2 or 3 years, this didn't solve all our problems, let's move on to something else. You know, I'm hoping that games, that teachers mostly will take sort of the benefit that their kids get from games and just put it in context. See it as just a better way to get the job done. If they do that, I think then we'll see some pretty wonderful things happen.
Thank you so much. I think you've provided some excellent insights into the future of game-based learning. Really like the point about how having adults being part of the picture, and I think having parents being part of the picture, and really for them to see the value of game-based learning and seeing games as a tool to leverage, you know, learning, and especially for STEM education, and especially for math, which is a critical component of STEM. So that's good. It sounds like the future is bright.
I hope so.
Keep your fingers crossed, right?
I do, every day.
So thank you so much, Greg. Everyone can please pick up that book. The Game Believes in You, and you can also follow Greg at what's your...
At GTOPO on Twitter.
GTOPO. Okay. Great. Thank you so much again, Greg. And if everyone online could hold their questions till the end, if you have something in store for Greg, that would be excellent.
I'll stick around.
Awesome.
One of the games featured prominently in Greg's book is Mind Research, ST Math. Joining us from Mind's headquarters in Irvine, California is Nigel Nisbet, who's the VP of Content Creation. Nigel has degrees in math and education, previously taught high school math, AP Physics, and AP Computer Science, as well as serving as the mathematics specialist in the Los Angeles Unified School District. Nigel, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning. Or good afternoon, in fact, to those of you on the East Coast.
Great, thank you. So I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Can you helped create some of the computer game base that Greg talked about in his book. Can you tell us a little bit about ST Math and what it's all about?
Sure. So ST Math is basically visual puzzles put together in a game-based situation where kids learn through trying and solving problems. And there are many critical aspects to this, but basically what we've managed to do is we've managed to boil pretty much all math down to getting a penguin across the screen. And it sounds very simple, it almost sounds trivial, but there are a lot of really important things here in the sense that the game never ever tells you what the answer is. You see whether or not you're right by whether or not you're successful in getting Gigi the penguin across the screen. So it's visual puzzles kids solve by solving these very challenging problems and trying to figure out how to make stuff happen. So this is something that we've developed over 20 years. This is not something recent. This has been developed and is continuing to be developed over a long time. Grew up to some very important neuroscience research at the University of California, Irvine. Now we have about 1 million students using ST Math across the US. And the ST stands for spatial temporal. The key thing here is it's that spatial reasoning that really is the underpinning of math. And by solving puzzles and playing these games, the kids develop a very, very strong spatial awareness, a very strong spatial reasoning, and a very good math skill base as well. But all of those things combine to produce real critical thinkers, good problem solvers, and really the foundation of that STEM thinking that we're looking to create in young people. So the games provide that opportunity. They provide a very rich environment for kids to learn, and hopefully we can hear a little bit later from some of the kids who've done that.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you. So we know Matthew Peterson. I've met him a couple times. He's a genius, the CEO. I think Matthew has a few different titles over there at Mind now. But when you all set out to solve this math crisis or begin to solve the math crisis, why did you choose games as the best way of accomplishing that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, ultimately STEM, obviously M is the STEM in math is the M in STEM. And it really is that foundation for all of the sciences and engineering. And I think one of the things that's important to realize is that for people facing challenges in STEM careers, those challenges don't switch off. It's not like a textbook that you can close and go home from. When you're faced with a challenge, it's something that you really need to be immersed in order to solve. And games provide that immersive opportunity for problem solving that you just can't replicate anywhere else. One of the key features as well is that what we're able to do in games is we're able to design them to provide sort of really important feedback to the kids. Immediate informative feedback. So the minute that they do something wrong, they see why or how it didn't solve a problem, and also the minute they do something right, they see, wow, that actually worked. And it's that sort of immersion in learning by doing that is very, very similar to the types of problems that we face every day. So if you're really going to solve the math problem and solve the STEM problem, you have to provide these immersive experiences for kids and for everybody to actually learn through doing, not just by sort of hearing about it or being told about stuff, but by actually trying and doing and failing, I think, is the really important thing. Games provide that opportunity for learning through failure, which is a very, very often overlooked. Often, as a classroom teacher, I know back in my earlier days, the idea of kids failing at stuff would terrify me. It'd be like, no, 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 they can't possibly fail. And I'd feel that I had failed if they went wrong, rather than fostering a climate where failure is good, learning through those failures and sort of changing strategies based upon that. That's powerful. So we design a game system effectively where that type of learning approach is embedded in the way that the games sort of bring students down a learning path. And you can't do that really very easily with any other sort of method of delivery. So it's a unique way of delivering content that dives right at the specific topic that we're interested in teaching, but does it in a way that really allows students to learn through doing. So that's the reason why we've chosen that as the methodology for reaching kids in that way.
Great. Yeah, I love your point about not being afraid to fail. I think when we talk to most of the STEM educators out there, I think that's been a big hurdle for us to get over as a country, and just I think the games really allow for that. One, to be fun, and for it to be all right to fail every once in a while. And being able to see that and look at what happens, I think ST Math and Gigi really are important in that. Recently, I know I've been working with mine for a while, and I think you've had this really core program, ST Math. It's been hugely successful, but now there's a little bit more of a shift for Mind Research Institute, trying to get outside of the classroom. Trying to get out into the informal environment. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and tell the audience more about that?
Yeah, so this is a very exciting, newer direction for us, but it's something we've been doing over the last couple of years. So I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, this notion of an experience gap. And one of the things we really need to do is nationally, we need to provide rich experiences for all students, not just in school, but also when they're out of school. We also have, to some extent, a sort of cultural issue with mathematics. It's okay for people to say things like, oh, I'm not a math person. And there are two problems there. One, it shouldn't be okay to say I'm not a math person, but the fact that it is means that we have this cultural blind spot where we think, oh, that's actually acceptable. The other issue there is everybody is, in fact, a math person. It's just something that they might not have developed because of the opportunities and experiences they've had. So for us, getting out of the classroom and providing ways to get into communities is critical about closing that experience gap, where we're providing those experiences for all students and families and communities. So for example, one of the things we did last year, we're doing again this year, we held a math fair here in Irvine, which was attended by over 4,000 people, which was a phenomenal success. And it was a hands-on opportunity for kids to play with exhibits, solve math problems in a very, very visual game-type way. Now we're doing the same thing again this year in Chicago. Let me just make sure I get the dates of this absolutely correct. So I think mistake. It's on September the 26th at Chicago's Navy Pier. So that's going to be a really big event. A lot of fun. I think we have 56,000 square feet of fun at the math fair, which is going to be very, very cool. So it's these types of opportunities. We also just have a math camp during the summer, which was cool. So we're bringing math out of the classroom and into communities, but bringing that same kind of learning by doing approach to all of the things there. So this is a very exciting thing for us. That is something we've been doing for the last couple of years.
Great, thanks. I know I think we've been definitely getting the word out about the math fair, but it's good to hear about your successes earlier this year, and look forward to that math fair in Chicago. I think it's an excellent time to get the whole community involved and to really make it fun, like you said. So outside of the math fair, I know you had something going on earlier this year that was we wanted to highlight in this, which was the K-12 Game-a-thon. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this is another national competition where we actually have kids design games. So it's one thing, obviously, for kids to play games, but it's kind of related to that whole notion of the best way to be really good at something is to teach it. So for students, the fun of actually designing a game and then getting to share that design, we run a national competition which has been very successful also, where the whole thrust is, again, about kids learning, not by playing, but actually designing their own games. So new idea, very cool, very interesting, and the level of creativity, and these are math games specifically, the level of creativity that kids bring to this design process, for me as a game designer, is awesome to see, because we're seeing these fantastic ideas, very rich thinking that kids are bringing to their design process for these games. So yeah, very, very fun opportunities. So the Game-a-thon is the thing that we're doing there.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nigel. I think this is pretty eye-opening. It's nice to hear from one of the architects of ST Math. I've been a fan of the program for a while, so nice to hear how that all came together and what the future looks for Mind Research and the Math Fair as well. So thank you. So our next panelist is Eileen Buckley, who's from PwC, which is also known as PricewaterhouseCoopers. So they're a big supporter of STEM education and math education in particular. I think everyone knows some of their core business is accounting. So having math skills for accounting is very, very important. Of course, PwC does a lot of work outside of just accounting, but I think having that focus and investment in math education is really important for them. So today we have Eileen Buckley, who leads PwC's youth education efforts as part of the firm's corporate responsibility team. Her responsibilities include overseeing Earn Your Future, a $190 million multi-year commitment to education that incorporates student and educator outreach, research, and collaboration with nonprofit organizations, including Mind Research, with a focus on innovation and impact. Eileen is a graduate of the University of Florida and Vanderbilt, and I think Eileen is a close friend, or her husband rather maybe is a close friend of a colleague of mine, Ted Wells, who is our usual guy on the town halls, but Ted couldn't join us today. So Eileen, without that, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
I can definitely hear you. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Can you tell us a little bit more about the financial literacy project at PwC and how that interacts with Mind? Why did you decide to approach financial literacy?
Absolutely. And sorry, Tim, if I didn't hear, I might have missed the latter part of your question, but I can certainly share an overview of Earn Your Future and what brought us to Mind. So you said it, it's a $190 million multi-year commitment to youth education with a focus on building financial capability. And that means helping students really understand financial concepts and being able to make stronger decisions in that space. And so not only do we work with students and look for ways to work with students, we also work with educators, because many educators who have the challenge of teaching financial education may or may not have formal training in that space. So we work quite a bit with educators in providing continuing education to teachers. We have had the pleasure of working with Mind for several years, and we really see math as foundational to financial skills. Oftentimes, we're teaching concepts that can get increasingly complex, and so with Mind's model of showing how to solve problems using the spatial temporal model, we're able to help students learn financial concepts in a very fun and engaging way. One other thing I'll mention is that we are moving more into the digital space. We appreciate how effective learning through games has proven to be, and so we're investing heavily in innovation through technology and digital-based tools.
That's great. Yeah, I think my next question ties into that, the new technology. So this project involves some exciting new innovation and technology that could, fundamentally change the nature of educational gaming. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Right, absolutely. So we, at the outset, we started working with Mind, I would say 5 to 7 years ago, and what drew us to Mind was the results, right? The data shows that their approach to teaching math is highly effective, not to mention fun for the students. So we have embarked on a journey with Mind to create interactive classroom technology where students in the same class or remotely across the country can pair up to interact and play games, math games, with each other. The students are working together, they're helping each other, they're providing feedback through the game, which can all be done remotely. So it brings a whole new interactive dimension to the experience of math games, and it has infinite possibilities that we're excited to explore. A few of us at PwC had the opportunity to test out the technology with the team at Mind, and it was a really memorable experience. It's something that we're excited to see come to life in 2016, and we're excited for this to really be scaled and to have as many students as possible experiencing what I'll call the magic of Mind.
Awesome. I just have one more question, and I'm sorry I didn't provide this one to you beforehand, but I think one of the something that's really important to corporations and funders of educational programs is really figuring out ways to involve their employees. And I think that's something critical. I think when we talked about the math fair and some of these other aspects of learning. But how does PwC leverage employee engagement? How do you get your employees involved with these students or any of these learning environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one of my favorite questions because another aspect of my work at PwC is very much employee engagement. And as many, I'm sure, on the webcast know, millennials have a strong interest in giving back to the community. They have a strong interest in social issues. And so it's on us, and PwC is one of the largest campus employers, to create those opportunities for our people. And we want them to be meaningful, skills-based volunteer experiences. So in working with Mind, we've had employees go into Mind math labs at schools around the country, whether it's New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and elsewhere, and work with the students, help them through the game with Gigi the Penguin. We've had volunteers at different Mind events, and I think it's important for our people. The average age at PwC is, I'd say, between 27, 28 years old. So while our people don't necessarily have children in school age yet, there is a fair number that do. So they are very excited seeing that PwC is supporting the 21st century learning approach, because they're thinking of their own kids and they're thinking of maybe stigmas around math that they experienced, and many of which you said many of our people have accounting and finance major backgrounds, so they want to help the next generation really develop strong skills in this space. The last comment would be that the global landscape of this as well, right? There's global implications here as we look to be a competitive country when it comes to strong math skills. Right. So our employees absolutely love it, and we're looking forward to continuing to keep them involved with our Mind relationship.
Awesome. Well, good to hear. Really like the stuff about financial leadership. Employability skill for young students to learn, especially when they think about going to college and the expenses that come with that. So doing that is really important. I think also what you said about employee engagement and what PwC is doing to get involved, not only with financial contribution, but really a true partnership is good. and really leveraging your millennial workforce. I think, as you said, I'm on the other end. I'm just there in the millennial, so I'm just on the end. But yeah, I definitely have that same feeling. So, and I know a lot of my friends and colleagues and people that I interact with do too. So, thank you so much, Eileen, and thanks PwC for your support of this program. Okay. So we've heard from a journalist, we've heard from a creator of games for learning of ST Math, and we've also heard from a corporation who's invested in this program. I think it's now time to turn to our teachers. So our first teacher is Shannon Duncan, who is with Orange County, California's Orange Unified School District. Shannon has been implementing game-based learning in her classroom for a long time now. She's a 6th grade math and science teacher at McPherson Magnet School. She also implements BYOD, which is Bring Your Own Device policy, to incorporate academic rigor with game-based learning in her classroom. And she previously led a class of inner-city students who participate in the LEGO Mindstorms robotics program. Shannon is also a veteran of the U.S. Army and has a master's in multicultural education. So Shannon, are you there?
I'm here. How are you this morning? Or I guess it's afternoon for you.
Yeah, it's the early afternoon for us. I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Tomorrow's back to school, so it's always an entertaining day the day before. But we're doing good.
Well, thank you so much for taking your time. I'm sure it's a very, very busy time of year for you, so we really appreciate that.
That's my pleasure.
Awesome. So what are the different forms of game-based learning that takes place in your middle school classroom at McPherson?
Well, what we've come to realize is that game-based learning can come in any shape, fashion, form. It's really up to what guides the teacher to make that happen. I find that it depends on my kids. So some of the things that we like to do is we like to use anything that gets the kids moving, anything that asks them to strategize, to challenge each other, but more importantly, something that will challenge themselves. So one thing that we really, really push our kids to do is to understand that you can find learning in anything. So for example, a lot of teachers are afraid of the online gaming or even tablet gaming of Minecraft. What we found is that is an amazing platform for our kids who struggle with math, because we can give them something from one of the history classes and cross-train across the curriculum and say, hey, you know, what is it going to take for me to replicate the White House as a block structure for something in Minecraft? And our kids who traditionally really struggle will find that they excel in this, because even though it's using math skills, they're using something that they love, and that's the video game playing. And so we use that as a catalyst to get them kind of sucked into our world, if you will, which helps us because then it empowers them to understand that there is really math in everything you do. As long as you make it engaging for them, they love it. So we use a lot of Minecraft. I am a huge, huge, huge believer in ST Math. They often laugh because my goal is that every one of my kids will have 100% completion by the end of the year, which apparently is something not many teachers do, but we're really successful with it. And I think if you give that program the fidelity that it deserves, it's going to work for you the way that it needs to. Our kids sometimes get frustrated, but again, that's giving them time to work with each other, to collaborate, to know that if they have questions, we've emailed Mind and said, hey, you know, I don't know the answer to this, can you help me out? Nigel's been a great assistance to us. Brandon over at Mind's been a great assistance to us. I've learned more as a teacher from the games. The other thing we find with the types of games that we play is they don't need to be held hostage in a classroom. So one of the things that's really good for our kids is we get them outside. We get them moving. We have them participate with the lower grades. We're a K-8 school, so we have something called the Buddy Program. And so our 6th graders are paired up with kindergartners. And what we've done is we've had our 6th graders work the Hop To It game that Mind has, and we've changed the numbers. So where we call out a number for one of the 6th graders, and it's, you know, what's the prime number of, and we give them a random number, 9 or something, and then we ask the kindergartner to be able to hop on their grid, and their number call out is what's 3 plus 3, or what's 9 minus 3, or something, where the numbers are similar, but the directive is different. So the types of games we utilize are really anything. We play Monopoly sometimes for understanding how basics of money works. Other times we'll have the kids just do basic dominoes. So really, game-based learning is what you make of it and what you manipulate the game to become.
Okay. And so for your students, how does game-based learning differentiate or go more to that next step? How does it engage students more in a more deep manner?
A deeper manner? Well, I think that the key with that is today's classrooms are very different. They're not like, we don't all have the luxury anymore of having an advanced math class, a remedial math class. They're all put in one class together, and that's very difficult to teach, to give level the appropriate guidance that they need in order to make them successful. So my kids who are really struggling, again, I teach 6th grade. I have kids walk in the door who are at basically a 4th grade level sometimes. Some kids struggle to add and subtract still. Some can hardly multiply. Others I can do algebra and geometry with, and they do great. The differentiation comes with the games because they're all in the even playing field when you put something in their hands that allows them to work at their own capacity and their own level. So when we play the Hop to It game, again, I can give directives to one group of students, even though they're all intermixed, one group of students that is foundational and core to their ability. And in the same question, I'm challenging the same group of kids to kind of think out of their box a little bit and challenge them mathematically to be able to say, okay, that person that's standing next to you is doing an algebra-based question while you're doing a multiplicative problem. How can you challenge yourself to meet them? Or as an advanced student, what can you do to guide the learning of the person standing next to you without even necessarily calling out or saying anything to them about that game that they're playing or the mathematical part of it? So giving them all the same types of challenges with minor nuances that are different is what allows you to differentiate without calling out any student who has a different learning ability, whether it be advanced or a lower base, or even some of our SDC and special education students. They mix in with us and play the same games. It's really about how you allow them the freedoms to know that there's nothing wrong with being at a different level. You are all on the same playing field when you're playing a game because it's just that. It's the game. It's not about winning or losing in the end with our kids. It's about what gains did you make during the game to make the progress that everyone else is making.
That was very informative. Thank you. I think I think something that struck a tone with me definitely is making sure that we can manage the different levels of learning. I think as someone who struggled with math myself, when I was going through school, I think there was a lot of stigma behind people at different levels, and sometimes it was you felt out of place. So I think using game-based learning is something that can overcome that gap.
Something I want to point out too before if we move on is I think outside of the education world, I'm a huge sports person. I've been in sports. Obviously, I was in the military, and to me, we have to learn the value of not being successful at something because it's what is the catalyst to making us become better. But I think something that's really important to note that I've changed in my own classroom, and this was a huge learning lesson for me in working with Mind, is the fact that I don't use the word failure so much in my room anymore, except to say to my kids, the only failure you have is never stepping out of your comfort zone to at least try something that you feel you may not be as successful with. And what that's done is it's allowed our kids to know it doesn't matter if you get the right answer every time. It's the fact that you tried and that you put the effort forward in that process to be able to gain the knowledge to be able to move forward. Because what's happening is our kids are shutting down. They're hearing, oh, I didn't get the answer correctly, so I'm wrong. No, you're not wrong. The answer was incorrect. The effort to try to attain and achieve that was correct. Therefore, you're making progress towards getting there. So the failure part of it is simply in never trying. The attempt and the progress of it is where we're finding the success. So I think the game-based learning has been a huge catalyst to help us understand that verbiage is what's allowing the growth mindset with our kids instead of a closed mindset. And having growth mindset with math is the only way that we're going to get our kids on a higher level.
Great, yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you so much, Shannon. Wishing you the best of luck on your next school year, getting started. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great year, and best of luck to all your students.
Thank you.
So next we're going to turn to a student and a parent combo, Kedar and Uma, who are joining us from Pennsylvania. Kedar is a 6-year-old programming enthusiast from Nazareth, Pennsylvania, who enjoys making games and stories in Scratch. He has his own booth at the National Maker Faire this summer and was featured as a young maker for his invention of an interactive book called Codylocks and the Three Bears that teaches young kids to use puzzle-like pieces to code without using a computer. This year, Kedar entered Mind Research's Gameathon with GG Multiplicate Dance, which adds music to math. Kedar's mom, Uma, also started Little Code Ninja, who's there. I think there's an excellent blog. Maybe Tommy, if we could tweet that out from them talking about game-based learning. Uma started Little Code Ninja, which helps shares insight with fellow programming enthusiasts. So, Kedar and Uma, are you there?
Yes, we're here.
Yes, we're here.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I know, Kedar, we were talking earlier, and you're off to karate class after this, so we don't want to keep you too long. But maybe if you could talk to us a little bit about the game you developed this year, that would be great, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
I have all the time for that.
Good. So, can you tell us about GG Multiplicate?
Yes. GG Multiplicate is about Gigi wants to learn the 8 tables in math. And he wants to win a gameathon. But there's a problem with Gigi. He does not like math.
Wow. Gigi doesn't like math, huh?
Yeah, but he really wants to win a contest called the Gameathon. So, the project I made called Gigi Multiplicate Dance is where Gigi does math and dances to music at the same time so he can be happy.
That's awesome. I know dancing makes me happy, so that sounds something like could be really fun. Maybe I'll have to give it a try. Can you send me it over?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. And what did you like most about making the game?
I love catching bugs, and bugs are like rotten eggs. And rotten eggs make your code stink. So bugs mean there's a problem in your code that you need to fix. There's sometimes too many blocks that you put, which makes the code confusing, even though it seems perfect sometimes. Or you just put 2 less blocks. You need to add a block, but it looks like everything's cool. So bugs are when things aren't perfect, but it looks perfect. So you need to make it work the way you want.
That's awesome. Well, good luck getting rid of those stinky bugs. I know they infest my computer sometimes too. So, thank you so much. Uma, a lot of parents might see this and wish their student or wish their child could become more interested or involved in coding. How did you get Kedar interested in coding at such a young age?
Well, I think all kids are interested in gaming. Daddy was playing the Wii and Kedar followed. And so it was difficult to peel him off of the Wii. And so we thought that if he could play, I see most kids are problem solvers from a young age. I feel like they use more brain cells than adults to learn a language, to learn motor skills. And it appealed to me that he could code. As long as a child can read, I believe that they can do programming. And so I found some resources online and got him started. We pretended as though his game broke and he had to make his own. So that's how it all started.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you for being such an encouraging parent. I think you're definitely a role model for getting students involved in coding and computer science.
I want Lego Star Wars.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Kedar? I didn't hear you.
I miss my Wii. I want it back. I miss playing Lego Star Wars, and I know it's still made.
Wow. Well, I think you'll have to talk to Mom and Dad about that, but...
yeah, I need to earn it.
Right. Yeah, that's very important. Uma, can you describe the things that you saw him learning when he was working through the Gameathon challenge?
Yes, I mean, I believe that he used a lot of math. Like Nigel said, math is hidden into everything we do in some ways. Coding uses a ton of math that kids don't call it math. So I saw him using a lot of time elements where there was the character that needed to make movements, and there was also the music component that needed to be coordinated with the movement of the character. So I saw him use the notes that were, again, math numbers. I saw him use math to do the coordination between how many seconds the character needed to wait before he could jump to the next spot, and how the music needed to synchronize with the game itself and stuff like that. So he used math a lot without calling it that.
Gotcha. Good. And what do you think the balance is? You know, as a parent, what's the balance for you between helping him and letting him learn on his own, and you know, really helping him through the production and creating this stuff? What's the balance between, you know, letting him do it by himself and you having input?
Well, I think it really depends on the kid. Kedar is a very strong-willed kid, so he will not take input from me unless he's tried it a lot and failed. So I have very little input getting him to do what I want, unless something breaks or he thinks that it's not working and he's getting frustrated with it. So the whole game, at least with the GG piece of it, he did the whole thing. All I had to tell him is, hey, we need to go to Chicago, and get him excited.
That's awesome. So you're going to Chicago later this year, or in September?
We're hoping, yes.
Okay. Good.
On my birthday?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kedar and Uma. Really appreciate your time. Good luck with karate class. Hope you get the Wii back. And just thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
You're welcome. Our pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
So our next student is Gemma, who's joined by her father Robert. Gemma is actually the winner of the Game-a-thon challenge last year with her game Crop Computations. So Gemma and Robert, are you there?
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
All right. So let's talk more about this Crop Computations game and where you came up with the idea, and just how you thought about it.
Well, it kind of, we actually started it kind of late because we took a good 3 weeks deciding like what we were gonna do. And so yeah, it took a while, and we went through like a couple other ideas that weren't very good. But because they were all basically the same style of like some of the math games that you would see maybe like 5 years ago, which are like really boring. There's no real game. It's just giving you problems, telling you if you got the answer right or wrong. But then we started thinking about what the games that me and my friends were playing at the time. And a lot of the ones that you see even today are farm games, like, I don't know, like Farmville.
Right.
So we decided, why can't we do something that everyone else already likes and put in what we're trying to put in, which is math. So that's how we decided on a farming game that involved it.
And is you're out in New Jersey? Is farming and crops part of the community that you live in? Do you see crops and things happening around you? Is that something that's part of your life?
I mean, we live in like a fairly clustered area.
We're in the suburbs, but I wouldn't say there are a lot of farms.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like there's enough that like you can have a personal garden, and I personally like gardening a lot. And there are a few like animals that like someone in, I don't know, like Los Angeles is like, oh my God, look at that. But for us, it's just like normal.
Gotcha.
But I don't think that was really a big influence, actually.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about what you learned from the process of building this game and going through the Game-a-thon challenge?
Well, the obvious thing is that I started out knowing nothing about coding other than like the basic, like how it was supposed to work. I didn't know anything, and I ended like being able to do like a lot of the basics and some. but it was pretty simple math, so I didn't really learn anything in the math part of it, but I did learn a lot in because I was learning to code as I was coding the game.
Right. Good. And I'm curious, you talked about coding. Is that something that you're interested in? Are you interested in, continuing to learn more about coding and computer science? Is that something you find interesting or not really?
Well, I think it's very interesting. It's not my dream. I'd like to learn more about coding. I haven't really had the opportunity recently because my school is kind of far away, so I get home pretty late, and I don't have a lot of free time to do what I want to do, which is coding and reading. But when I do have the opportunity, I try to continue to learn some. And I think that being a computer scientist would be an interesting job in the future, though not my top one, but definitely in like my top 5. I have a whole
You're only
list.
12. You've got a little time to think about it.
Right. So, Rob, what did you learn throughout this process, and how were you involved? What was it like watching Gemma develop the game? And
well, it's quite interesting. I have to say I was really minimally involved. Gemma had told me that this was a project she was working on with a bunch of her fellow students.
One person.
Well, one intensively, but there were a couple others on the team.
They did nothing.
They were in the video, at least, that you
They
produced.
were in the video.
In any case, and of course, like many projects like this, in the 11th hour, when there were a few crises that came up about how to, particularly how to create the set of instructions for the game, I got a little more involved in trying to figure things out, and I'm not an I know almost nothing about coding myself. I studied Pascal when I was in university 40 years ago or 30 years ago, but I basically have no background in this. So I picked up a little bit just to try to help her, but she really did it all, and it was very interesting to see because it really, she was very motivated by the challenge.
Gotcha. And so, Gemma, I know you're a 7th grader, but what are you thinking about? What interests you? What's your passion? What do you think about studying? What would you like to do when you get older? I know that's a big question.
Sorry, it's funny because when I was younger, I actually made an entire PowerPoint on what my goals were when I was an adult, and I'm sure those have changed a bit, but. I don't know. I mean, I'd like to really I don't like the idea of how a lot of people just like focus on, like especially in college, like you have a major and then like you're not expected to. Like if you choose mathematics, you're not expected to stray from mathematics. Like it's strange for people to. Like, if you had 2 majors, say, it would be strange if you heard of someone who had a major in mathematics and a major in, I don't know, Russian literature. But I don't really like that, and I'd like to really be very incorporating in what my focuses are.
So, meaning what? What are your top 2?
Well, I actually really don't like math, even though it's my best subject. I really prefer English, but because I'm good at math, I'd like to get better at it.
But you keep talking about being a biologist.
I do keep talking about being a biologist
career goals.
because that's interesting to me. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Gemma and Rob. Are you back to school soon? Are you already back to school?
I have like a couple weeks.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoy those last couple weeks of summer, and thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. So, Becky, I think I had originally scheduled you before this, but are you with us there?
Hello?
Hi, Becky. Thanks so much for joining us. So Becky Renegar, is that how you say it? Renegar?
That is, yes.
Is a gifted intervention specialist for students who are identified as gifted in math at Piqua Central Intermediate School in Ohio. This is her 19th year of working with gifted students. She has a Master of Arts in Gifted Education and is currently the Teacher Division Chair for the Ohio Association of Gifted Children. Becky uses game-based learning and technology in her classroom to meet the academic and creative needs of her students. She has had students participate in the Game-a-thon for the past 2 years and had 3 teams that placed in the top 5 last year. So Becky, you definitely have a lot of experience in this subject. What impact do you think game-based learning has had on student motivation and engagement?
Well, I'll tell you right now, my students begin the school year asking if we're going to be participating in the Game-a-thon. So it's really made a positive impact on them. They start planning their ideas out as soon as the competition from the previous year is over. So it's something that's definitely been a motivating factor for them to participate in. I find that the creativity involved in game design and making the video for the Game-a-thon has definitely motivated my students to think about ways of incorporating math into a real-life application. Many times they're motivated to learn new math as the need arises. For example, I had 2 students this past time around. They designed a skee-ball machine for their game, and in order to do that, they had to determine the slope of the ramp, and we looked at the Pythagorean theorem, and these are 3rd graders, but they had some basic knowledge of right triangles, so we were able to take that to the next level for them, and they were able to learn about how that impacted the slope of their ramp, and that was a really good real-world application. So the other thing that I noticed about the amount of engagement showed my students is drastically increasing when they're able to interact through play rather than completing, say, a worksheet. Online games are great for them because they're providing them with instant feedback. Sometimes, when you complete a worksheet, you turn it in and you have to wait for the teacher to give it back to you to find out how you're doing. So that interaction that's constantly stimulating them and their engagement has also been huge in using games in the classroom.
Awesome. And what do you think are the advantages of using and leveraging game-based learning for higher ability learners? What do you think is the best part of that?
I think math games online give my students the ability to be involved in math skills at the level that's appropriate to them. Many of my students are beyond their current grade placement in math. So for them, it's really easy to pull materials and to differentiate for them to give them the challenges that they're ready to take on so that they're not waiting to learn. And so many games have multiple levels of difficulty, and that allows them to take it to the next level or to take a skill beyond their grade level to the next, so that they're constantly learning and being engaged in math. Another thing is that designing the games for the Game-a-thon has given them opportunities to engage creatively in critical thinking skills. The mere act of designing and following through with a project really gives them the opportunity to develop operational skills that'll help them later on in life. And I think mental play and problem solving are also very important for learning. If you think about how babies and young children learn, it's evident that their interaction with the environment provides them with the opportunities to observe and to manipulate their surroundings to learn and apply that learning. So in many ways, I believe that we can do a lot for kids, especially as they continue to get older, by giving them game-based learning to provide them with a platform for this level of engagement.
Great. And so what are your plans for this school year? When do you start school?
Well, today is actually the 2nd day of school. We're phasing students in, so I'll begin seeing students starting on Monday, and we'll begin our classes, and we'll continue to participate in the Game-a-thon. We're going to be doing some enriching things, and I've got students that are waiting with bated breath to find out how they did this past year. So.
Still waiting on the following students to the office. Chandler Bond.
Well, thank you so much, Becky. I think we're going to move into the question and answer period of this. What do you? I'll just start with you since we have you on the screen. What do you think the best way to carry out game-based learning to capture students' interest in math when they get older?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to repeat that.
Sure. What do you think the best way to carry out game-based learning to continue to capture student interest once they're, once they get a little bit older?
Well, I think, one, kids are already involved online. Having a presence in what they're already doing, making things relevant to what their interests are. As Gemma was talking about earlier, lots of kids are already playing Farmville. So engaging kids in their interests will help with that a lot.
Awesome. Thank you. And one other question that I have for you as well as for Shannon. How supportive has your school administration been in deploying game-based learning? Have you been met with any challenges, and what are some tips for other teachers who are looking to either engage in this or to become more involved?
My district has been very supportive. They have encouraged us, and last year when the Game-a-thon was held in California, we even did a virtual connection with Bind Research. The kids had an opportunity to participate and share what they were able to do. So communication is key, and presenting to the people that can support you. These are the advantages that come from this. These are the opportunities that we can provide. And at Piqua, our school motto is opportunity matters, and that really is true. Is selling the opportunity to those in your district and to other teachers to support what kids need, and say, hey, here's an opportunity that can really help kids.
Okay. Shannon, I wonder if you can comment on that?
I was just going to say I have to highly agree. I think our administration, my boss is phenomenal. He is hands down an amazing supporter of everything that we've done. And I think the thing that makes me so impressed and thankful to have him is that Mr. Irvin makes sure that the door is always open to allow anyone in who's going to contribute. And so we've had Mind on campus practicing some of the different games that they were going to put at math camp and various things. But the other part to that is you never know if something's going to work unless you try it. And if you don't try it, then you're never going to have successes. And so for us, the ability to continue to put those into play in our classrooms, we get 110% of his support. The great thing is, because he sees our kids happy, he understands it's got value. And when that takes place, he's the first one to stand up and say, what do you need? Can I get you more supplies? Do you need extra time somehow? We use a rotational model, so I don't have an inclusionary classroom. I see different groups all day for both subjects that I teach. And we've learned that this is just an amazing way for our kids to find connections to things that they wouldn't have normally had. So I think the ability to have a positive connection with your administration is absolutely the key. But I think even bigger picture than that is we're able to get the word out, not just for our school, but our administrator can help spread the word that, hey, we have a game that really works, or we're searching for a game that we could use for any specific thing that we're struggling to find. And he helps be that voice and that catalyst. So we've actually created some connections inside our district with other schools, but also outside as well. So that's been amazing.
Great. I think maybe the next question that I have would be for Rob and Uma. Maybe Uma, starting with you, what advice do you have to other parents about getting involved with game-based learning or coding? What do you think has been helpful for you, or what do you see as other parents becoming involved in this space? What's helpful?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I think it would really help to look at children as problem solvers and not as people who need to be taught everything. And when they're learning something, to ask them a lot of questions and have them own what they're learning, rather than pretending like they don't have a brain on their own, that everything needs to be taught. I think children are very intelligent. They solve a lot of problems that we don't give credit for. And if we could just get them passionate about what they already like, I think they would take it to greater heights.
Thank you. Nigel, I think this next question is for you. One, I think we've had a lot of interest on Twitter about the math fair. Where can people go to learn more about the math fair? Is there somewhere where you can direct them?
There certainly is. I just want to actually backtrack for a moment and just echo some of the comments that Uma made. I think there's a very famous quote. Who it's from eludes me at this moment, but it's the notion that education is the lighting of a fire, not the filling of a pail. And I think the point is that game-based learning and kids involved in these things allows us to do this type of stuff. So hopefully you guys are now seeing a, let's see, I think, so we have a slide up that hopefully you can see has web addresses for the Gameathon, so mindresearch.org/Gameathon, which starts next January. The next iteration of it starts next January of 2016. And the Math Fair in Chicago, September 2015 this year. It's going to be very exciting. I'm actually looking very forward to going there myself. I was very involved with the Math Mystery Theater, which was one of the interesting exhibits. Math on a stage, yep, interactive with the audience, which was very, very cool. So yeah, these are some of the things that we're doing over the next year or so. That so these websites would be good places for people to go to get more information about those.
Great. I think one other question that I have for you, Nigel, is how have you found effective partners like Shannon and Becky? Like how do you go about finding school systems, and how do you identify these teachers who are rock stars?
So I think one of the interesting things is that very often these people find themselves, if you like. So we're in thousands of schools, but it doesn't take long. People kind of self-identify. We find these sort of early adopters, the people who are really keen to do something different or interesting with their kids, who are prepared to try and do things that have that vision of learning. And I think Uma summed it up very nicely. This whole thing, we've got to stop thinking about education as the sort of mechanism where the kids need to be taught these things. It's about looking at children as people who are problem solvers and then providing opportunities around that for them to grow and develop that skill. So we find teachers, they're around, who believe this, but not only do they believe it, they actually do it. They do that and bring that to their classrooms. And these people self-identify. We find them. We work with all the districts very closely that we're in. And I think I wanted to also talk a little bit about, Shannon mentioned sort of administrative support. We actually had a lot of support back in the day as well from PwC with working with principals, which was also another way that they helped us greatly. Price Waterhouse had somebody come out from PwC and work with us at all of our principals institutes as we were rolling stuff out to districts. And it was very, very fabulous. This again, for principals to see that there was a real sort of support from a company like PwC for a program, and also then for the people from PwC to see this sort of thing on the ground. So these types of partnerships help us get into the districts and help us work with teachers at scale. Then we find people like Shannon and Becky who obviously do great things with their kids. And we just try and provide the opportunities then to bring this out and make it all happen.
Great, thank you, very helpful. I think the next question is for Eileen. Eileen, are you still there? Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Great. So I was just curious, any tips for other, funders of education or game-based learning or math education? What are some tips, when you're looking at different programs that you obviously like, but something that you want to invest, your time, your resources, and your employees in? What do you have tips for other corporations?
Sure, and I'll try to keep it brief, but I'll just give you some quick categories. So metrics is huge. I mentioned impact reporting, so beyond just outputs. So a lot of nonprofits can share these are the number of students or this is the number of teachers, but beyond that, what's the behavior change? What's the knowledge being retained? So more complex measures of measurement, we certainly look for those. We look for scale. So something, we're a global organization and have about 65 offices in the US, so we look for something that's a scalable model. As far as people engagement, and we get creative with different organizations, just like we have with mine, for ways to engage our people at all levels, from the intern level to the retired partner level. Another thing is brand visibility. So it's not all about PwC, but we want to know that we're getting together around shared interest, and that our brand's going to be elevated, and that we're seen very much as, not just funder, but as a true partner, so that we're helping drive the strategy of what we're investing in. So those are a few things that we look at and that Mind has been really great in working with us on.
Great, thank you. Those are really helpful tips. I like, metrics. I think that's something really important, as well as the other things you mentioned. My next question is for Greg. Greg, sorry, you've been here sitting next to me, but we haven't asked you a question in a while. So when we think about the big picture of K-12 education in the United States, where does game-based learning fit into the larger picture, and what do you think it will look like going forward?
I think it's still pretty small. I think the group we heard from today are kind of early adopters in a way, and they are sort of ahead of the curve. I think it's going to grow mostly because, from what I'm seeing, is that teachers who use it and use it successfully, they don't just like it, they love it. I think there's a real kind of a sort of a cognitive leap that folks make when they see, just the kinds of things that people have been talking about here today. When they see their kids, not only getting their work done, but they see kids really getting excited about what's happening in school, for the kind of learning that's taking place. So, I'm not going to make a prediction, because the predictions are always kind of stupid and wrong, but I will say that you can't help but see that the kind of excitement you're seeing here today, I think, is going to spread in the next couple of years.
Thank you so much. I think you're spot on, and you're right. It's maybe a little too early, or maybe not a good idea to make a bold prediction. But I think what you outlined is very helpful. My next question is for Gemma and Kedar. Maybe Gemma, I can start with you. Are you still there? So my next question would be, do you plan on participating in the Game-a-thon next year? As the reigning champ, do you come back, and what would your game look like for next year if you did something different?
I think I would probably do another programming thing, because I think for me that physical games are kind of limited. Like, a lot of physical games have been done already, but the invention of the computer isn't, or even just programming computers that I can use. There are not as many games, there are more opportunities, so I would probably do something like that, but I don't have any ideas yet, but I think I'd like to join if I get a game together by January.
Well, you mentioned Russian literature earlier. Is that something you're interested in? Could you make a game for Russian literature?
Oh, not really. It just kind of popped into my mind, because there was, I don't know, I think one of the characters in the book I was reading had a major in Russian literature, but I might want to do something that's like related to English or history or one of the other major subjects that aren't usually associated with math.
Gotcha. Well, good. And Kedar, are you still there? Thank you. Are you planning on participating in Game-a-thon next year? What's your next game that you think you'll produce?
It's called a math bot. I'm going to use the Arduino to make a bot that tells how to do math.
Oh, awesome. That's good. So will it be a cousin to Gigi, or maybe Gigi's brother or sister?
It will teach anybody who wants to learn.
Oh, that's a very, very, very good answer. Uma, while I have you here, you mentioned that, I think Kedar mentioned that he's homeschooled. How does this fit into, the homeschooling curriculum and that movement? It's not something we hear a lot from here at STEM Connector. So could you enlighten us a little bit about how that fits into the overall plan?
Yeah, sure. I think the events like the Game-a-thon are very helpful, because when kids, at least I can speak about Kedar, I don't know how the people do it, but interested in a subject, they kind of keep going at it for months together. If it's math, if it's coding or whatever it is, you just see the passion come through versus when you go to a regular school, you see that you have to do a strict curriculum where you have to concentrate on a few different subjects at a time. So events like the Gameathon give him an opportunity to hone in on the skills that he's really good at and produce things that will be useful to his community, that with whom he can share what he's learning and inspire them to do their own stuff.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I think we have just a few more minutes left. I'm going to start with Becky. Are you still there? Could you give us maybe 3 to 5 words that you would sum up this conversation and game-based learning? Maybe the impact of game-based learning that you see. Just something, a short phrase.
Okay. Well, engagement, motivation, perseverance, creativity, and learning. I think a combination of those 5 things are really what you see when these kids are getting involved. And it's opening doors and giving them lots of opportunities.
Great. Eileen, maybe could you go next? Just a quick wrap-up.
Sure. I suppose I have to do a plug here of what's to come in 2016. I'm really excited, and as I hear from Becky and others in the educator community, from the PwC standpoint, we're excited to get more tools and resources out into the education community that will be easily accessible and will help, just like we talked about, tools in the classroom to make learning more fun and more successful.
Great. Thank you again for that. We couldn't be there without you. Gemma, maybe a couple closing thoughts on game-based learning?
Oh, well, I think that for a lot of kids, not me included because I like reading, but I think for a lot of kids, like learning stuff, game-based learning is a much more effective way to teach them and to keep them engaged, because I know that a lot of people don't like reading, or even if they do like reading, they don't have enough stamina or reading or basically school. Almost every single kid doesn't like school, and I think that connecting what they do when they have free time, like what they'd actually want to do, with what everyone else wants them to do is a very good way to get them to do it.
So you're saying that game-based learning it captures a student's attention and makes them more likely to participate in the learning process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Kedar and Uma, maybe start with Kedar.
Kedar, why do you think game-based learning is fun? Why is gaming fun?
Because you can make your own games too.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to always play the game. You can get ideas from it of what game you can make, so it's very helpful to make your own game.
Uma?
I think that the next generation is definitely going to benefit from the game-based learning where it's not traditional, where they have to sit down and learn in a certain way. I see my son moving all the time when he's thinking. He's always playing ball when he's doing math. And I think movement really helps children learn better, and also to engage them in a way where they're not sitting in one place and absorbing, rather they're thinking and using what they're learning to make things so that it stays with them for longer.
Awesome. That's very, very well put. Nigel?
I have a quick little one quick message for Gemma before I go to sort of a summary, which is that Dr. Matthew Peterson, who founded Mind Research and is the inventor of Gigi, if you like, actually has degrees in engineering, Chinese literature and biology. So it's perfectly possible to sort of kind of go down that road, and not everybody wants to focus exclusively in one particular area. So and if anybody comes out even half as clever as Matthew, then they're doing very, very well. So I guess for me, in summary, the key thing that we're able to do is we're able to design games that help students learn by building their intuition, and we're able to do that by creating immersive environments where they learn, build intuition, and they own the learning. The learning is something that they have done. It's not something that somebody is doing to them. So that shift, that's the key. I mean, that's what we need to do in life. We need to approach the experiences that we have with the solid knowledge that we learned something by doing it ourselves, and we're able to provide that opportunity in game-based learning for all students, not just some, but all students, to learn in a very rich manner where they build intuition and then solve problems using the experiences that they've gained.
Great. Thank you. Maybe, Greg, do you have any parting thoughts?
Parting thoughts. I mean, I guess, and I think that's going to be something we're going to see a lot more of in the next couple of years, is tools that are being developed that are going to give teachers the ability to use games in the classroom much more easily and sort of with much less fuss. There are lots of tools being developed now that I'm hearing about for the first time in the past just few months that are going to give teachers the ability to sort of take their content, if you will, and build a game out of that. And I think that's going to be a really interesting field.
And Shannon, any parting thoughts? I know you're probably headed to school.
I think it's important to note that you know, part of gaming means TPR, and TPR is total physical response. It's getting a physical reaction from your body and your mind at the same time that empowers every part of you to learn and not be stagnant. And I think in order for that to keep continuing, the one thing that we have to do as parents, teachers, game inventors, companies, all of us alike, is we have to take that to the powers that be in education, and we have to remind them that outside of just our local administration, it takes the higher powers that be to understand it doesn't have to happen with a book and a piece of paper. Learning happens through alternative measures that when your students are engaged, they want to learn. So I think using game-based learning in our classroom is the most powerful tool we can use, but I think we also have to remember that unless we keep pushing this movement forward, we're going to reach a point where we need the outside sources to open that secondary door. And unless we continue to let them know that it is working and that it is powerful, they're going to have a stopgap for us, and we can't allow that to happen. It has to be something that is encouraged, and for all of our levels of learners to know that they can be successful with it. So I think it's important to notate both of those. The whole child needs to be attended to with learning, and that happens with game-based learning, but we also need to keep pushing it so that it does continue to grow.
Great, yeah, excellent point there, and I think you know, we're in DC, so we're happy to carry that message of game-based learning, and you know, really try and get some traction with the larger education community, which we all know can be a challenge at times. But I just want to say thank you to all of our participants today. Really thoughtful and engaging conversation on game-based learning. We're going to be archiving this town hall so you can share it with your friends. If you go to STEM Connector /town hall, or the game-based learning town hall, the recording will be there, and it will also, we also have recordings of all our other town halls on topics like youth competitions, mentoring, women in STEM, higher education, and a number of different other areas. And we do town halls throughout the year, so please, I think Twitter is probably the best way to keep track of everything that's happening in STEM Connector. But I just want to say thank you very much, and keep up all the hard work. Really appreciate your time.